The message began as a whisper in the static, a fractured voice carried across light years of dark silence. To anyone who can hear, this is the colony of Vera Prime. We are under sea. Our defenses are broken. We beg you, please. Someone, anyone, answer. It repeated over and over like a ghost caught in an endless loop. Across the great span of the Galactic Concord's communications web, the signal bounced, picked up by relay stations, passing freighters, border patrols, and listening posts. Thousands heard it. And almost all ignored it. The Cathari were a minor species, with little wealth, little territory, and no leverage among the great powers. Their colony on Vera Prime was not rich in resources, nor placed on any strategic hyperlane. It was a small, quiet settlement of farmers, miners, and traders, a place considered too unimportant to risk fleets and soldiers for. In the halls of the Concord Council, the matter was brought up once and dismissed within minutes. A silver-skinned delegate waved his tendrils and declared, "The expense of intervention outweighs the value of the world." Another agreed coldly, "It is unfortunate, but the Concord cannot be a charity for every outer colony cry for help. If raiders have targeted them, it is their misfortune." And so the council turned away. The great fleets remained docked, the signal kept playing, and on Vera Prime people kept dying. But the signal did not go unheard by all. Far from the shining spires of the Concord, in the dust and rust of a shipyard orbiting a forgotten moon, one man sat in a battered cockpit and listened. Marcus Hale lit a cigarette with hands that trembled not from fear, but from the weight of memory. His scarred face was cast in the flickering light of failing consoles, his dark eyes locked on the broken plea. Beside him, strapped into the co-pilot's seat, Jurok shifted nervously. Tall and silver-scaled, with long limbs and sharp claws, Jurok was unmistakably Cathari. His emerald eyes glowed faint in the dim light. He had heard the message too, and for him it wasn't just noise. It was his people, his kin, his blood. "They are still alive," Jurok said softly, his voice rough. "If no one goes, they are slaughtered. Marcus, if we do not go, they are lost." Marcus took a drag and let smoke curl around his head before answering. "I didn't say I wouldn't go," he muttered. His voice was low, steady, the voice of a man who had seen too many hopeless causes. "I said we won't be walking into this clean. Whoever hit Vera Prime isn't looking to loot and run. This is systematic. They're wiping you out." Jurok's claws clicked nervously on the console. "Then we must stop them." Marcus gave him a sideways look, something between tired humor and grim respect. "You've got a lot of faith in a half-broken ship, 2 guns, and 1 old soldier." The Cathari met his gaze without flinching. "I have faith in you." Marcus let the words hang in the air. He turned back to the console, ground out the cigarette in a cracked tray, and pushed the throttle forward. The engines coughed, sputtered, then roared awake. The entire hull shuddered, metal creaking like bones under strain. "Then we're going," Marcus said. The stars stretched into streaks as the ship leapt into the void. The journey took days through the back lanes of the Concord's neglected frontier. Jurok spent most of it packing the narrow corridors, restless with worry. Marcus spent it hunched over the engine core, repairing, modifying, and muttering curses to machines older than both of them. At night, when the ship fell into the false silence of drift, Jurok asked questions. "Why help us? The Concord ignores my people. They call humans dangerous, deathworlders, monsters that thrive on violence. Why would you risk yourself for us?" Marcus didn't look up from the pistol he was cleaning. He ran a rag across its battered surface, checking the chamber. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. "Because I know what it's like when nobody comes." He said no more. Jurok did not ask again. On the 3rd day, the jump drive spat them back into real space. The world of Vera Prime filled the viewport, a blue-green sphere marred by smoke. But Marcus's eyes were drawn not to the planet, but to its orbit. Black silhouettes circled like vultures, warships, sleek, angular, bristling with weapons, not pirate craft cobbled together from scrap, not civilians pressed into raiding. These were professional killers. Jurok hissed, his crest flaring in fear. Zorathi designs, raiders from the outer rim. Marcus's jaw tightened. He'd seen there, like before, mercenaries who sold themselves to the highest bidder, fleets that could strike and vanish, leaving only corpses and ashes. "They're not just raiding," Marcus said. His voice was ice. "They're occupying." On the planet below, entire settlements burned. Trails of fire cut across fields and forests. From orbit, Marcus could see skimmers strafing civilians as they fled across the plains. Explosions lit the atmosphere like cruel fireworks. Jurok's claws gripped the console hard enough to leave marks. "We must land, we must help them." Marcus stared at the chaos, smoke reflected in his dark eyes. His voice came low and hard. "Then we make them look at us first." The ship's alarm howled as Marcus dropped them into a steep descent. Enemy scanners lit up, red warnings screaming across the console. Turrets swiveled, targeting locks clicked into place. "Marcus," Jurok shouted over the roar of engines. "Take the guns," Marcus barked. "Make M bleed." The Cathari leapt to the rear turret. His claws wrapped around the grips, eyes narrowing with fury. Green lances of plasma spat from the ship's underbelly, tearing through a pursuing skimmer. The raider exploded in fire, scattering debris across the valley floor. Marcus grinned grimly. "That's it. Give the bastards something to chase." He pulled a crate from under his seat with one hand while steering with the other. Inside were improvised bombs, earth-forged steel packed with homemade explosives. Illegal, brutal, effective. With a flick of switches, the bombs dropped like stones from the belly of the ship. They struck the raiders below with thunderclaps, fireballs ripping through armored columns. The comms erupted with snarls of alien language, shouts of anger, orders screamed. The Zorathi were furious. Marcus's smile was thin and hard. Good, now they're paying attention. The flagship swung its cannons upward, targeting them. Energy flared at its core. "Marcus," Jurok shouted, "they'll tear us apart." "Not if we run first." The ship dove, engines shrieking as Marcus threaded it through the jagged canyons below. Plasma fire rained down, slamming into the cliffs, shaking stone loose in avalanches. Marcus flew with the reflex of a man who had lived too long on the edge, rolling, banking, scraping past stone walls by meters. Behind them the flagship thundered, weapons spitting death. "Hang on," Marcus shouted. The ship screamed through a narrow ravine, alarms flashing. Rocks tore gouges across the hull, sparks spitting inside the cockpit. Jurok fired blindly at their pursuers, green light carving through the canyon shadows. And then suddenly, the scanners lit up, not enemy contacts, not weapons fire. Life signs, hundreds of them. Marcus stared at the readings, stunned. Jurok's voice trembled. "It can't be survivors." Marcus's hands tightened on the controls. "They're hiding underground." Cliffhanger, end of part 1. As Marcus steadied the ship inside the canyon, the comm system crackled with a faint transmission on a hidden band. A child's voice whispered through static. "Is anyone out there? Please, we're still alive." Marcus and Jurok locked eyes. They weren't too late. But the enemy was hunting. The canyon walls rose high around them, jagged like broken teeth. Smoke from burning villages drifted above, a dark veil across the sky. The faint voice on the comm still echoed in Marcus's ears. "We're still alive." He guided the battered freighter lower, hugging the canyon floor. Enemy signals danced across the scanner, but none had locked yet. The Zorathi raiders above were still confused, their attention scattered between chasing civilians and trying to catch the human ship that had just bloodied them. Jurok's claws hovered over the sensor console, his green eyes glowing faint in the dark cabin. "They're close, less than 2 kilometers through the rock." Marcus flicked the comm switch. "This is Marcus Hale responding to your signal. Who am I speaking to?" The reply came in broken static, a child's voice trembling. "This is Sira. My father says we are many hiding. Please, can you help us?" Marcus exhaled slowly, his voice softened, steady and calm. "Listen to me, Sira. You're not alone. We hear you. We're coming." The words hung heavy in the cabin. Jurok turned his gaze to Marcus, surprise flickering across his scaled features. It was not just what Marcus said, but how he said it, with certainty, with promise. "Marcus," Jurok whispered, "you should not promise what cannot be done." Marcus's jaw tightened. He never looked away from the scanner. "Then we'll make sure it gets done." The freighter descended deeper into the canyon, vanishing into shadow. Marcus cut the main engines and let momentum carry them, switching to thrusters to keep quiet. He found a narrow ledge where the ship could wedge into stone, half hidden. He landed rough but stable. The silence that followed was suffocating. Outside, the muffled thunder of distant bombardments shook the cliffs. Marcus rose from the pilot's chair and grabbed his rifle. The weapon was old, scratched, patched together from spare parts, but it was reliable. He slung it over his shoulder and checked the sidearm at his hip. Jurok straightened, uneasy. You mean to go into the rock? Only way to reach them. Those kids and families won't last if we sit here. Jurok hesitated, his scales rippling faintly with unease. You humans always running into fire. Marcus gave him a grim smile. That's why we're still alive. The cavern entrance was concealed beneath a ridge of stone, sealed by a blast door built into the cliff. Jurok traced the old Cathari carvings etched into the stone. His claws brushed symbols of his people, family crests, harvest runes, protective wards. His throat vibrated with a low hum of grief. They were never meant for war, Jurok murmured. Marcus set a hand on the cold metal of the door. Then we'll make sure they don't die in one. The panel hissed, unlocked from within. A narrow slit opened, revealing frightened eyes. The blast door rumbled aside, and the two stepped into darkness. The cavern was alive with whispers and the smell of smoke. Hundreds of Cathari huddled together, families, elders, children wrapped in scraps of cloth. Fires burned low in crude pits, casting long shadows across the jagged stone walls. Gasps rippled as Marcus entered. A human, someone whispered. A ripple of fear ran through the crowd. Children shrank back, clutching their parents. Elders muttered in harsh tones. The word Deathworlder hissed through the air like a curse. Marcus ignored them. He crouched near the closest group, a woman cradling a child with a bleeding leg. He opened his pack, pulled free a medkit, and began working. His hands were rough but careful, applying a sealant and wrapping the wound. The child whimpered but stopped shaking when Marcus gave him a ration bar. Eat, Marcus said softly. It'll keep your strength. The boy bit down hungrily. The mother's eyes softened. Jurok stepped forward, raising his voice in their native tongue. This is Marcus Hale. He fought through fire to reach you. He fights still. Murmurs broke out among the elders. He is human, one said, voice sharp. They bring only ruin. Marcus looked up from the child, his eyes dark but steady. Maybe, but I know what it's like when no one comes. I won't let that happen here. The cavern fell silent. For a moment, the weight of his words hung heavy, and even the frightened Cathari seemed to sense it. The whispers of Deathworlder faded. Slowly, the refugees began to eat from the rations he handed out. For the first time in days, hope flickered. Marcus worked without rest. He fixed broken air filters with scraps of wire. He sharpened stones into blades. He showed older children how to weave nets into trip lines, how to stack rocks to fall as traps. The Cathari watched him work, fascinated. His hands seemed never still, never unsure. Where they saw useless junk, Marcus saw weapons, tools, defenses. Where they saw weakness, he saw survival. One boy whispered to another, he makes war out of nothing. An elder muttered, that is what Deathworlders do. But the boy's eyes were bright. Then maybe that is what will save us. By dawn, scouts returned, bloodied, terrified. They are sweeping the canyons, one gasped. His scales were scorched, his arm bound with cloth. The Zorathi, they will find us by nightfall. The cavern filled with fearful cries. Parents clutched their children, elders wailed. Jurok's claws clicked in frantic agitation. Marcus stood slowly, wiping grease from his hands. His voice was calm, almost cold. Then we don't wait for them to come. The Cathari stared at him. Marcus slung his rifle over his shoulder, scanning the cavern. We know these rocks better than they do. We've got people who can fight, people who can set traps, people who can distract. They think they're hunters. We'll show them prey can bite. Gasps fear, disbelief. One elder shouted, we are farmers, not soldiers. Marcus's voice cracked like iron. Neither were we. Silence. He looked across the cavern, meeting eyes one by one. You want your children to live. Then tonight we stop running. Tonight we fight. The cavern was alive with nervous energy by nightfall. Marcus moved among them, teaching, shaping, pushing. He showed them how to hold a weapon, how to stay low, how to wait for the right moment. Jurok translated quickly, his own claws trembling but his voice strong. You can be more than prey, Jurok said to them. Marcus believes it, so must we. The people nodded, fear still in their eyes, but something else now, too, a spark. Marcus watched them sharpen blades, set nets, prepare stones. His chest tightened, not with pride but with grim recognition. He had seen this before, in ruined villages, in desperate last stands. He knew the cost. But he also knew there was no other way. Just before they set out, a scream cut through the cavern. All turned, a woman wailed, her child gone. Marcus sprinted to the far wall, where a crude tunnel led deeper into stone. At its mouth lay a single mark scratched into the dirt, an emblem jagged like a fang. Jurok froze, his voice was a hiss. The Zorathi, they have been here. Marcus's eyes went cold. He lifted the symbol, studied it, and spat on the ground. They know where we are. The cavern erupted in panic. Jurok's claws trembled. Marcus, what do we do? Marcus's rifle was already in his hands. His voice was low, steady, unyielding. We hunt. The skimmer lights cut through the canyon night like blades. They swept across stone and shadow, the engine's low roar echoing off jagged cliffs. Dozens of them, sleek Zorathi craft armed with cannons and stun beams, closing fast on the cavern entrance. At their center, bound in chains, was the missing child, Sira. The girl's small form slumped across the skimmer's deck, wrists locked, her face pale in the searchlights. One of the raiders gripped her by the arm, lifting her high for all to see. The message was clear: we have found you, we have your blood. Run, and she dies. Inside the cavern, panic spread like fire. Mothers clutched their children. Elders wailed prayers. Young Cathari stared wide-eyed, frozen between terror and rage. Marcus Hale stood at the mouth of the cavern, rifle in hand, his silhouette hard against the glow of enemy lights. His voice cut through the chaos, sharp and cold. Silence. The noise died. Fear did not vanish, but it stilled, pressed down by the weight of his tone. Marcus scanned the canyon, counting skimmers, marking terrain. His mind clicked through patterns, instincts honed in battles long past. Too many for a straight fight. Too many for desperation alone. But terrain and traps that was different. He turned to the Cathari. You set the nets. A young male nodded, voice trembling. Across the ridge paths, as you said. Good, and the rock piles. Ready to fall. Marcus checked the lines of faces, terrified, untrained, but burning with the will to live. He raised his rifle. Then listen close. You don't win by standing tall. You win by making the enemy bleed for every step. Tonight we don't run. Tonight we teach them fear. The first skimmers hovered closer, their lights sweeping. The lead raider barked in guttural Zorathi, amplified by a loudhailer. The translation band on Marcus's wrist buzzed, cracking out broken words. Come out, kneel, live. Jurok hissed low beside Marcus, claws flexing. They lie, they will not spare us. Marcus's mouth twisted in a grim smile. Then we don't kneel. He raised a fist, signaling. Across the cliff edges, Cathari children and elders pulled tight on cords knotted into stone wedges. Nets of rock and steel strained against gravity, waiting. The raiders dismounted, armored boots striking stone. The leader dragged Sira forward, shoving her to her knees. His rifle pressed against her small back. Marcus's jaw clenched. He whispered to Jurok, when I move, drop them. Then he stepped forward, rifle lowered at his side, voice carrying across the canyon. You want us? His voice was calm, almost mocking. Then come and take us. The Zorathi leader snarled, raising his weapon to strike the girl. Marcus's rifle snapped up. One shot. The raider's helmet cracked, blood spraying. He dropped before he could pull the trigger. Now, Marcus roared. The cliffs exploded. Nets snapped loose. Avalanches of stone thundered down, crushing skimmers, smashing raiders into the canyon floor. Explosions roared as Marcus's improvised bombs detonated, hidden charges buried in rock. Fire and dust swallowed the canyon in chaos. Cathari poured from the caves, shrieking, wielding spears, blades, and scavenged rifles. Their fear burned away in the fury of survival. The raiders staggered, disoriented, shouting orders. Marcus moved among them like a shadow, rifle spitting fire, every shot precise, every movement efficient. He fought not like a soldier in formation, but like a predator, striking fast, vanishing, striking again. Jurok fought beside him, claws ripping into armor, eyes blazing with vengeance. The Cathari refugees, once trembling and broken, now surged with courage. Farmers slammed stones into raider skulls. Children slashed nets into armored legs, tripping enemies for their parents to finish. Elders shoved torches into fuel lines, setting skimmers ablaze. The canyon echoed with screams, some of rage, some of terror. Marcus pushed through the chaos, eyes fixed on Sierra. She had been thrown aside in the confusion, scrambling against the rock wall. A raider loomed over her, blade raised. Marcus sprinted, body slamming the alien aside. His rifle cracked point-blank, blasting through armor. The raider dropped. He knelt by the girl, pulling her chains loose with a hiss of sparks from his torch cutter. Her eyes were wide with terror, then relief. "You're safe now," Marcus said softly, his scarred face grim but gentle. "Stay close to Jurok, he'll keep you safe." The girl nodded, tears streaking her silver cheeks. Jurok appeared, covering them with claws dripping blood. His voice was fierce. "Go, Marcus, we hold here, you stop them." Marcus rose, rifle in hand, and turned back into the storm. But the Zorathi were not broken yet. Their flagship in orbit roared to life, its cannons opening fire on the canyon floor. Explosions shook the ground, stone walls collapsing. Skimmers regrouped, armored troops pouring out in disciplined formations. This was not the desperate chaos of pirates. This was an army. Marcus ducked behind a shattered skimmer, panting, sweat streaking his face. Jurok slid beside him, chest heaving. "We cannot hold against this, not forever." Marcus's eyes scanned the battlefield, calculating. They had won a reprieve, bloodied the raiders, bought hope. But now the weight of the fleet above pressed down. Without something more, they would be crushed. A shadow loomed through the dust. A raider captain, towering in heavy armor, advanced with a blade as long as Marcus's arm. The human rolled, firing. The captain shrugged off shots, armor glowing. With a roar, he swung. Marcus caught the strike on his rifle, the metal bending, sparks flying. The two crashed together in brutal melee. Marcus ducked, struck, countered with his sidearm. The captain's blade grazed his arm, blood spraying. Marcus snarled, pain fueling him. With a savage kick, he drove the alien back and shoved a grenade into the gap of its chest plate. The explosion tore the captain apart. Marcus staggered, coughing in smoke. His rifle was ruined, his arm bleeding, but his eyes burned with fire. "Not done yet," he growled. The battle raged until the canyon floor was a wasteland of fire and bodies. Finally, as dawn broke, the surviving raiders pulled back, retreating to their skimmers. The flagship's cannons silenced, its engines flaring as it drifted higher into orbit. The refugees cheered weakly, voices cracking with exhaustion. Children clung to their parents. The elders wept. They had survived the night. But Marcus's expression was hard, grim. He knew this wasn't victory. It was a warning. The Zorathi had only tested them. The real storm had yet to come. Jurok limped to his side, his scales scorched, claws dripping. "We fought them back. We live." Marcus nodded. "For now, but they'll be back, and when they come, they'll bring everything." He looked toward the horizon, where black smoke curled from burning villages, and above, where the fleet still circled like wolves. His voice was low, steady, unyielding. "Then we hit them first." Cliffhanger, end of part 3. As Marcus spoke, a shadow fell across the canyon. The refugees looked up in fear. From the clouds above, a new ship descended, sleek, black, bristling with weapons. But it bore no Zorathi markings. Jurok hissed, his eyes wide. "Marcus, that is not a raider ship." The hatch opened, and stepping out armored and scarred was a human. The ship descended slow and deliberate, as though savoring the silence it cast over the canyon. Its black hull gleamed in the pale light of dawn, sleek and predatory, nothing like the jagged Zorathi vessels above. It moved with precision, not hunger, a hunter, not a beast. The hatch hissed open, metal ramp grinding against stone, and then the figure appeared. Tall, armored in matte black plates, scarred across the face with a long white line that cut from temple to jaw. A human. Marcus's breath caught. His rifle rose instinctively, though it was battered and near useless after the night's battle. Jurok hissed low, claws flexing. "Another Deathworlder." The figure's voice carried across the canyon, calm and clear, wrapped in the edge of command. "Marcus Hale." Marcus froze. He hadn't heard that name spoken in years, not with recognition, not with weight. The figure removed his helmet, revealing hard eyes the color of steel. Marcus's stomach turned. He knew that face. "Rurk." Commander Elias Rurk, once Earth's own. Once a soldier Marcus had followed into fire. A leader turned mercenary. A man who had vanished years ago, rumored dead or worse. And here he was, alive, standing at the head of the raiders who butchered a colony. Rourke's lips curved into a smile without warmth. Didn't think I'd find you in this dust pit, but then you always did run toward lost causes. The refugees behind Marcus gasped. They whispered in confusion. Two humans, one their savior, one their doom. Marcus's grip on his ruined rifle tightened. You're with them. Rourke shrugged, casual. They pay, they obey, and unlike the conquered, they understand power. The Zorathi don't beg for help, they take. That's why they'll last, that's why I'll last. Jurok stepped forward, eyes blazing. You slaughter innocents for coin, you burn our homes. That is not power, that is cowardice. Rourke glanced at him with disinterest. And what are you, scaled one? Another mouth to feed, another corpse in waiting. Marcus stepped between them, voice low and cold. Don't. Rourke's eyes narrowed, but his smile returned. Still protecting strays, Marcus, still clinging to that bleeding heart. You think compassion makes you strong. It doesn't. It makes you weak, and it gets people killed. The words stabbed deeper than the blade at Marcus's hip, because once Rourke had been his commander. Once Marcus had believed those same words. But that was before he'd watched villages burn while orders told them to stand down. Before he'd seen children die because the mission came first. Before he'd walked away from it all, choosing exile over obedience. Now those words rang hollow, poisonous. Marcus met his gaze, unflinching. Then I'll die weak, but I won't die like you. The canyon erupted with motion. Zorathi troops poured from Rourke's ship, armored and disciplined. More skimmers swept in from the horizon, engines howling. The Cathari refugees panicked, retreating back into the cavern. Jurok roared at them in his native tongue, rallying what courage remained. Marcus's voice cut sharp. Fall back into the rocks, traps ambush, same as before. The refugees scattered, obeying. But this time the enemy moved faster, tighter. They weren't chasing blindly, they were sweeping, driving the survivors into corners. Marcus fired, picking targets, moving through smoke and dust. His shots were precise, every trigger pull buying seconds, but the numbers pressed in. Jurok fought like fury incarnate, claws ripping through armor, his roar echoing in the canyon. But even he was forced back step by step, blood staining his silver scales. The refugees fought with desperation, using nets, stones, sharpened poles. But against disciplined soldiers, their courage only slowed the inevitable. Marcus ducked behind a boulder, chest heaving. His rifle was empty. He drew his sidearm, the last magazine slamming home. He checked the refugees, families scrambling deeper into tunnels, Jurok holding the line with a dozen youths. And then Rourke was there. He moved like a wolf through the chaos, blade flashing, pistol barking. His soldiers gave him space, following his command with silent obedience. He closed the distance with Marcus, eyes locked. Always were stubborn, Rourke called. Always thought you knew better than command. Now look at you leading farmers into a slaughter. Do you think this ends well? Marcus rose, pistol raised. It ends when you're in the ground. They clashed. Gunfire cracked, blades sparked against steel, fists struck. The two men fought with the ferocity of predators, each strike fueled by years of buried rage. Marcus's punches were brutal, survival-born. Rourke's counters were precise, trained. A blade sliced Marcus's side, blood soaking his shirt. He fired point-blank. Rourke twisted, the shot grazing armor. They grappled, slammed into stone, rolled through dust and fire. For a moment, Marcus saw not the raider commander, but the man he once followed, the voice he once obeyed. And that memory hurt more than the blade in his ribs. Rourke's fist cracked across his jaw, sending him sprawling. Soldiers swarmed, pinning him, chains locking around his wrists. Jurok roared, charging, but was thrown back under a hail of stun beams. He collapsed, twitching, claws scraping stone as he tried to rise. The refugees screamed, scattering deeper into the cavern. And Marcus, chained, bloodied, was dragged to his knees before Rourke. Rourke crouched, his smile cold. I could kill you here, but I won't. You'll live long enough to see what happens next. He gestured to the sky. The flagship's shadow loomed overhead, its engines glowing as it aligned. Rourke's voice carried through the comms, amplified for all to hear. Orbital strike, target the caverns. Gasp screams. Jurok's voice rasped, broken but defiant. No, there are children in there. Rourke didn't even look at him. Collateral. The flagship's cannons began to charge. energy flaring bright in the sky. Marcus struggled against chains that cut into his wrists, his voice raw with fury. "Rurk, you'll burn them all." Rurk's smile widened. "Exactly." The sky burned white. The flagship's cannon swelled with energy, the glow spreading across the canyon walls like a false sunrise. The sound built low in the bones, a vibration that rattled teeth and stone alike. The refugees in the cavern clung to one another, eyes wide with helpless terror. Jurok lay on the ground, his scales scorched, body convulsing from the stun beams. He tried to rise, but his legs buckled. Marcus strained against the chains, biting into his wrists. The metal cut deep, blood dripping into dust. He roared, muscles straining, veins standing out like cords, but the chains held. Rurk stood before him calm, almost serene, his smile faint. "This is the difference, Marcus. You fight like a cornered animal, I fight like a god. And they," he gestured toward the cavern, "will burn as proof of it." The flagship's cannon reached its peak. Light blazed across the canyon. The Cathari screamed. And then silence. The cannon dimmed, the glow died. A voice crackled through comms in harsh Zorathi. Rurk's smile faltered. His soldiers shifted uneasily. "What is it?" Marcus demanded. Rurk's expression darkened. "Power fluctuation, reactor spike. They'll fire again in minutes." Marcus let out a short, bitter laugh, despite blood trickling down his chin. "Not gods after all, huh?" Rurk's fist struck his jaw, snapping his head back. The world blurred. "Chain him," Rurk growled. "Take him aboard. I'll make him watch the end from above." The next hours blurred into pain and motion. Marcus was dragged onto the black ship, his wrists bound behind him, ankles chained. The air reeked of oil and blood. The corridors were cold metal, the walls lined with the symbols of mercenary warbands. They threw him into a chamber deep within the ship. Steel walls. A single chair bolted to the floor, restraints clamped across his arms and chest. Rurk entered slowly, helmet off, face calm again, his eyes cold steel. In his hand a blade glinted. Not for killing, for cutting, testing, reminding. "You know why you failed, Marcus?" Rurk asked softly. He paced the room, his boots echoing. "Because you never learned the truth. Mercy is weakness, compassion is liability, order is built on fear. That's what I teach these raiders, that's why they obey." Marcus spat blood onto the floor. "You were a soldier once, you swore an oath." Rurk stopped, looming close. "I swore to survive. The oath was a leash. The conquered left Earth to rot. The colonies burned while we waited for orders. And you broke, Marcus. You ran. I didn't. I built something stronger." His blade pressed against Marcus's throat, cold steel kissing scarred skin. "Come with me. Lead with me. Two Deathworlders together. You know what we could carve out here." Marcus's eyes burned with rage, but his voice was steady. "I've buried too many because of men like you. I'd rather rot here than stand beside you." Rurk studied him, silent, then smiled faintly. "So be it. You'll still serve, you'll watch them burn, and they'll see their faith in you was the last mistake they made." He turned, motioning to guards. "Keep him alive, he watches the strike." Back in the canyon, chaos reigned. The flagship drifted above, cannons charging once more. The Cathari refugees cowered in the cavern, smoke filling the air. Jurok staggered to his feet, bloodied but burning with fury. He spoke quickly, rallying the survivors. "We cannot wait. If we stay, we die. Marcus gave us tools, traps, bombs, nets. We use them now. We strike first." An elder shook his head, despair thick in his voice. "Against ships, against soldiers, we are nothing." Jurok slammed his claws into the stone, sparks flying. "We are not nothing. We are alive. And Marcus fought for us when no one else would. Will you let his fight die in the dirt?" The cavern fell silent. Then a young voice cried out. It was Sira, the girl Marcus had saved. Her small body trembled, but her voice was clear. "He came for us, we fight for him." The spark caught. Refugees began to rise. Children sharpened sticks. Elders tied explosives to stones. Farmers gripped their makeshift blades with shaking but determined hands. They would fight. On the flagship, Marcus sat bound in the chair, staring at the view screen. He saw the canyon below, saw the survivors moving. His chest clenched. They weren't hiding anymore, they were preparing. A guard noticed too, speaking in harsh tones to Rurk. The commander smirked. "Let them, the cannon will erase them soon enough." Marcus strained at his chains, fury building. He could not sit here helpless while they stood in the fire. His arms bled where the restraints dug in. His shoulders screamed, but he pulled harder. And then, with a snap of torn flesh and a grind of bone, one hand came free. Pain blinded him, blood poured down his wrist, but he was free. He slammed his elbow into the guard's throat, ripping the man's pistol free before the body hit the ground. The second guard lunged. Marcus fired twice, point-blank, dropping him in a spray of smoke and blood. The alarms blared. Marcus staggered to his feet, chains dragging from one wrist, pistol smoking. His body burned with pain, but his eyes were fire. He had one thought: stop the cannon. Meanwhile, Jurok led the charge from below. The Cathari stormed the canyon floor, laying explosives in the shadow of skimmers, slashing fuel lines, ambushing patrols. They moved like the hunters they had once been, fury in their hearts, Marcus's lessons in their claws. Explosions ripped across the valley. Raiders fell, stunned by the ferocity of those they had dismissed as prey. Jurok roared, his claws drenched in blood. For Vera Prime. The refugees answered in kind, their voices rising into a thunderous cry. But above, the flagship's cannon flared again, energy building to its peak. And Marcus, staggering through corridors filled with fire and alarms, knew he had seconds left. He reached the reactor chamber, massive, glowing, pulsing with energy. Guards swarmed, rifles raised. Marcus dove behind cover, firing every shot precise. He fought like a cornered wolf, brutal and desperate. One by one, the guards fell. Smoke filled the chamber. Marcus limped to the console, blood dripping from his arms, fingers trembling as he pulled wires, jammed fuses, and forced overloads. The reactor screamed, lights flared red, the ship shook. The cannon dimmed. Below, Jurok and the refugees paused mid-battle as the light in the sky faded. The cannon's glow sputtered, then died. Hope surged. Jurok looked up, whispering through bloody lips, Marcus. On the bridge, Rourke watched in fury as systems failed. His voice roared, seal the reactor, find him. Marcus's voice cut through comms, hoarse but steady. Still think mercy makes us weak, Rourke? Funny, compassion's the only reason you haven't burned this colony already. Rourke's eyes narrowed, you'll die for this. Marcus's answer was steel, not before you. Cliffhanger, end of Part 5. The flagship shuddered violently as alarms blared. Reactor overload, fail-safes disabled. Marcus staggered from the console, bloodied and broken, but smiling grimly. And on the bridge, Rourke stared at the rising heat levels, his voice a snarl. He's going to take us all down. The flagship shook like a wounded beast. Red alarms strobed across its dark corridors, and the deep growl of its engines faltered under strain. Smoke filled the air as klaxons screamed warnings in a dozen tongues. Marcus staggered out of the reactor chamber, pistol still in hand, his arm bleeding freely where torn chains dangled. He braced himself against the wall as another tremor rattled through the ship. Over comms, Rourke's voice thundered. All hands, contain the reactor, kill Hale on sight. Marcus grinned despite the pain, his teeth bloody. Good luck with that. Below, the canyon blazed. The Cathari, driven by Jurok's roars, fought like creatures reborn. Farmers who once tilled fields now swung makeshift spears into raiders' armor. Elders lit fuses on bombs crafted from Marcus's scraps, hurling them into skimmers. Children, small and swift, darted between rocks to cut fuel lines and sabotage weapons. The canyon floor was chaos, lit with fire and plasma. Jurok stood at the center of it, his silver scales blackened with soot and blood. He wielded a scavenged blade in one claw, his other tearing through enemies with savage precision. His roar echoed, shaking stone. For Vera, for the fallen. The refugees answered, voices rising in one unified cry. Fear had left them. Rage had taken its place. On the flagship, Marcus moved like a ghost through the corridors. He stole weapons from the fallen, striking swiftly, vanishing into smoke. His earthborn instincts guided him, using shadows, cover, terrain. The Deathworlders' way, fight dirty, fight smart, fight to live. He made his way toward the hangar bay. If he could seize a skimmer, or better, a troop transport, he could deliver a blow the Zorathi wouldn't recover from. But every corner brought new enemies. He ducked plasma fire, his pistol barking in return. A raider lunged with a blade. Marcus grabbed the wrist, twisted until bones snapped, and shoved the alien into his own comrade's gunfire. He kept moving, every step fueled by fury and the memory of voices crying, "Please, someone, anyone." In the canyon, the refugees' victory seemed within reach. Dozens of raider skimmers lay in flames. The ground was littered with alien dead. The Cathari stood taller now, their eyes no longer hollow with fear but blazing with defiance. Jurok panted, chest heaving, blood dripping from deep gashes across his scales. But still he fought, still he roared, still he led. Until the sky split open. The flagship, its reactor burning, turned its fury downward. Not with precision cannons, not with skimmers, with desperation. Its venting plasma engines howled, spewing molten fire across the canyon walls. Whole ridges collapsed, avalanches crushing fighters and civilians alike. The heat was unbearable, the air itself igniting in sheets of flame. Refugees screamed as stone and fire consumed them. Jurok froze, eyes wide in horror. They mean to burn the whole canyon. Marcus reached the hangar bay doors just as the ship shuddered violently. The floor tilted under his feet, throwing him against a wall. He clawed his way upright, vision swimming. Through the hangar windows, he saw it, the flagship belching plasma fire into the canyon. His blood went cold. "Not them," he rasped. He sprinted, ducking fire, slamming his stolen rifle into raiders who tried to bar his way. He seized the nearest transport craft, a bulky skimmer loaded with munitions. With bloodied hands, he tore into the controls, hot-wiring, forcing power through smoking circuits. Engines sputtered, then roared awake. Marcus hauled himself into the cockpit, teeth clenched. Time to bite back. The transport lurched from the hangar, engines screaming as it dropped into the canyon below. Jurok raised his head at the roar of engines. Through smoke and fire, a massive transport hurtled down, guns blazing. It tore into raider lines, plasma fire ripping apart skimmers, explosions lighting the canyon. The Cathari gasped as they saw who piloted it. "Marcus," Jurok whispered, all mixing with fury. The human rammed the transport straight into a Zorathi heavy tank, the impact erupting in fire. Marcus staggered out through flames, his armor scorched, rifle blazing. He moved like a force of nature, cutting down raiders left and right, dragging survivors from wreckage, barking orders that turned chaos into resistance. The refugees rallied around him. Their fear was gone. Behind Marcus Hale, the Deathworlder, they felt like warriors. But the flagship wasn't done. Its main reactor screamed, unstable but still functional, and with its last strength, it charged its core cannon once more. The target wasn't the canyon, wasn't the fighters, wasn't the caves. It was the last shelter, the underground chamber where the youngest survivors huddled. Marcus saw the glow build in the sky. His breath caught. He knew the look of a charging cannon. He had seconds. He turned to Jurok, who limped to his side, drenched in blood but still standing. Their eyes locked. "They're aiming for the shelter," Marcus said. Jurok's crest flared in horror. "The children." Marcus gritted his teeth. "Then we don't let them fire." The plan came together in seconds. Marcus rallied the strongest survivors, pointing to the cliffs. "Draw their fire. Make them look everywhere but up." Jurok's voice boomed, translating, his own claws raised. "We fight until our last breath." The refugees screamed in answer, charging into the flames once more. Marcus and Jurok broke off, sprinting toward a crippled raider craft half buried in rubble. Smoke belched from its engines, but the core still glowed. Marcus smashed into the cockpit, yanking wires, forcing power. The ship groaned, engines sputtered, lights flickered. It was broken but not dead. Marcus strapped himself in, blood dripping into his eyes. Jurok gripped his shoulder, eyes burning. "This is madness," the Cathari rasped. Marcus smiled faintly. "It's survival, Earth-style." The craft roared to life, lifting shakily into the air. They aimed it at the flagship above. The Zorathi fleet scrambled. Fighters swarmed, weapons blazing. The broken craft shook under fire, alarms screaming. Marcus fought the controls, weaving through explosions, dodging plasma beams by inches. Jurok manned the guns, claws steady despite wounds. He tore through fighters, his roar filling the cockpit. "We will not die quietly." The survivors below cheered as the battered craft rose into the heavens, a final defiant spear aimed at the flagship's heart. But time was short. The cannon's glow swelled, brighter, hotter, seconds from firing. Marcus shoved the throttle forward, teeth clenched, voice a growl. "Hold on." The flagship loomed before them, a wall of black steel and fire. Its cannon core blazed, ready to unleash death. Marcus's craft screamed upward, breaking through the smoke. Fighters closed in, but Jurok's guns blazed, cutting a path. "Closer," Jurok shouted. Marcus's eyes burned with fire. "We're not just getting close, we're going in." The ship groaned around them, metal screaming from the impact. Sparks rained from broken conduits, flames licking across the fractured hangar walls. Marcus staggered to his feet, rifle gripped tight despite the blood that ran freely from his wounds. Jurok rose beside him, battered but unyielding, his claws clicking against scorched steel. And before them, framed by the glowing reactor core, stood Elias Rourke. His armor gleamed in the dim light, matte black and flawless. His blade burned with plasma fire, a weapon forged to cut through steel and flesh alike. His smile was cold, almost fond. "You always were too stubborn to die easy," Rourke said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "But you should have stayed down." Marcus's jaw clenched, his voice raw but steady. "You should have stayed human." Rourke's laugh was low, bitter. "Humanity is weak, chained. The conquered let us rot while aliens sneered at us as monsters. I stopped caring about their pity. I became the monster they feared, and it gave me power." Jurok hissed, his emerald eyes burning. "You call this power? Slaughtering children, burning the helpless. You are not strong, you are hollow." Rourke's gaze flicked to him, dismissive. "Stay out of this, lizard. This is between men." Marcus raised his rifle. "No, this is between predators, and you forgot, sometimes the prey bites back." The chamber erupted in fire. Rourke lunged, his plasma blade slicing through the air. Marcus fired, the rounds sparking against armor, staggering him but not stopping. The two crashed together, weapon against weapon, fists striking, blood flying. Jurok joined the fray, claws flashing, forcing Rourke to divide his focus. Together they pressed him, Marcus's strikes brutal and unrefined, Jurok's slashes wild but powerful. But Rourke was a soldier forged in Earth's wars. Every move was precise, efficient, lethal. He caught Jurok's arm with a twist and drove the alien to the ground, his blade raised to finish. Marcus roared, slamming into him, wrestling the blade aside. They grappled, the plasma edge inches from Marcus's throat, the heat searing his skin. His muscles screamed, his bones felt ready to snap. "Still clinging to them?" Rourke growled, pressing harder. "Still believing in weaklings, they'll only drag you down." Marcus bared his teeth, his voice a rasp. Better to be dragged down than to stand alone in the ashes. With a surge of fury, he drove his knee into Rourke's side, tearing the blade free. He fired point-blank into the commander's chest, sparks flying as armor cracked. Rourke staggered, blood spilling, but he laughed even as he coughed. "Good, that's the fire I wanted, that's the Deathworlder I trained." The reactor screamed behind them, alarms wailing as energy spiked out of control. The ship shook violently, smoke filling the chamber. Jurok staggered upright, blood pouring down his arm. "Marcus, the reactor, it's going to blow." Marcus's eyes never left Rourke. "Then we end this first." Rourke grinned through blood. "Exactly." The duel raged on, savage and desperate. Marcus fought with everything left in him, rifle used as a club, pistol emptied into armor, fists striking with the fury of a cornered beast. Rourke countered with brutal precision, every blow a soldier's kill strike. Jurok struck whenever he found an opening, his claws leaving deep rents in armor. But Rourke was relentless, driving them both back, his laughter echoing through fire. "You can't stop it," he roared. "The reactor's mine, the fleet's mine, this galaxy will kneel to the fire I bring." Marcus spat blood, his voice a growl. "Not if we burn you first." The fight reached its peak. Rourke drove Marcus to the ground, blade raised for the killing strike, his face twisted with triumph. "You'll die knowing you failed them, Marcus, just like always." Marcus's hand scrabbled at the ground and found a grenade, one of his last. He pressed it to Rourke's chest plate, locking eyes. "Not this time." The blast tore them both apart, hurling them across the chamber. Marcus slammed into the wall, vision blackening, ears ringing. Rourke crashed to the floor, armor shattered, his blade flickering and dying. He tried to rise, coughing blood, but his strength failed. His eyes, still steel, fixed on Marcus. "You think you saved them? The galaxy will eat them alive. Compassion will kill them." Marcus crawled to his feet, blood dripping from every wound. His voice was hoarse, but his eyes burned. Then we'll teach the galaxy what compassion can do. He drove Rourke's own blade through his chest. Rourke's breath hitched, his steel eyes dimmed, and then he was still. The reactor screamed, reaching critical. Energy arced across the chamber, heat blistering the air. Duroc staggered to Marcus's side, dragging him upright. We must leave now. Marcus looked down at Rourke's body, then at the reactor. His mind raced. If the flagship exploded here, the canyon would be obliterated, the refugees incinerated. He met Duroc's eyes. We don't run, we guide it. Duroc blinked, stunned. Guide. Marcus pointed weakly at the control panel. If I force the overload into the engines, we can drive the explosion upward into orbit, save the canyon. Duroc's eyes widened, but you will not survive the blast. Marcus's lips curled in a faint, bloody smile. Deathworlders don't die easy. Together they stumbled to the console. Marcus slammed bloodied hands into controls, ripping wires, rerouting power. The reactor howled, alarms screaming warnings in every language. Duroc braced him, claws steady despite the shaking. At last the engines flared, power redirected. The explosion was set. Marcus collapsed against the console, breath ragged. Go, get them out. Duroc's voice trembled, his eyes fierce. Not without you. Marcus's eyes softened, even as blood dripped from his lips. You have to. They need someone who believes, someone who fights for them when no one else will. That's you, Duroc, not me. Duroc's claws tightened on his shoulder. For a moment he looked as though he would refuse, but then he bowed his head, eyes blazing with grief. I will carry your fire. The Cathari survivors in the canyon looked up as the flagship tore itself apart. A blinding column of fire erupted skyward, ripping through clouds, scattering the raider fleet in chaos. The explosion lit the heavens like a second sun, its roar shaking the world. And then silence. The refugees stared, stunned. Then cries of joy, of grief, of awe filled the air. They had survived, they had fought, they had won. Duroc emerged from the wreckage hours later, dragging a battered figure across the stones. Marcus Hale, burned, broken, but breathing. The refugees surged forward, tears streaming, voices rising in thanks. They tried to call him savior, hero, legend. But Marcus shook his head, his voice a rasp. Not a hero, just a man who answered. Epilogue. Weeks later, the story of Vera Prime spread across the stars. The conquered tried to silence it, embarrassed by their refusal to act. But rumors traveled faster than decrees. Whispers told of a colony abandoned, of raiders who came like wolves, and of a single Deathworlder who answered the call when no one else would. The Cathari spoke his name with reverence. Children carved his likeness into stone. Elders told stories of the night they stood with a human and became warriors. And across the galaxy, oppressed voices, forgotten colonies, abandoned peoples began to ask a dangerous question. If humanity answered them, maybe humanity would answer us too. Marcus Hale sat by a fire one night, his body still broken, scars deeper than before. Duroc sat beside him, silent, the night sky bright with stars. They'll come again, Duroc said softly. Different raiders, different enemies, they always come. Marcus stared into the flames, eyes tired but burning with a quiet fire. Then we'll be ready. He looked at the stars, remembering the first plea he had heard. They pleaded for rescue. The galaxy ignored them. He clenched his scarred hands. But humanity answered.